Welcome. We appreciate you being here. This is the ADA compliance for bottle fillers and drinking fountains, our masterclass on the subject. We are going to cover the ADA compliance for these particular products in its entirety. We're very happy to have everybody here. Thank you very much for attending and taking the time. I hope you really enjoy this. Keep in mind as I move through the presentation that the requirements that I'm going to cover today apply to many types of equipment, not just drinking fountains. But again, that is our focus today, drinking fountains and bottle fillers. We think we as a company are uniquely situated to give insight into this topic, and I'll share exactly why we think that here in a moment. Also consider that all of you have your own state and local laws that must be adhered to, so ensure that those are taken into consideration as well. State and local standards must be stricter than what is currently in place at the federal level, which is what we are digging into today, the federal standard for compliance. This will be an hour long. My name is Justin Dunn. I'm the field marketing manager over at Haws. I have a long history with the ADA, education around the ADA, on-site compliance, and other things of that nature here. With me is Hayden Delgado. If you'll say hi, please.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. My name is Hayden Delgado. I'm the specification manager at Haws, and thank you everybody for joining us today.
If you needed to reach out to talk to somebody about ADA compliance, you would have a hard time finding people that know more than Hayden and myself here at Haws, though we have a lot of specialists in the subject, given what it is that we do. So we are always happy to help. However, Hayden and I are going to cover the entire standard for you today. I'll cover the first half of the presentation. Hayden will cover the second half of the presentation, both of us giving you our unique insights into the standard and compliance and what to do and what not to do. With that out of the way, post questions at any time during the presentation. Use the questions section of the control panel up there, a little box with the question mark in it. We'd really appreciate that. We can keep it separate from the chat. Any questions that cannot be addressed during the brief Q&A that we'll do at the end, because we have some submitted questions that we'll cover, those will be answered in via email in a follow-up to this presentation. So please submit away, go crazy. Any questions that you end up having, Hayden and I will personally dig into those, answer them, put them on spreadsheet, and get them back to you so that you have those for reference, and you can see what was on other people's minds. So we'll send those out shortly after the presentation is finished and get those over to you. We'll also launch poll questions during the webinar. There's a total of 5. They're very brief, but we very much appreciate your participation in those. It gives us insight into what you have going on, helps us to improve this product, and gives us a little break in between all of the information that I am going to be throwing at you. Now, that follow-up email will be sent 24 to 48 hours after the presentation. It depends on how many questions, how complicated they are, etc. But we have some content that we'll be sending you afterwards, which will include an on-demand recording link for this presentation so that you can rewatch it, you can share it, etc. It'll include presentation slides in PDF format so that you can have a quick reference as to the information that we're going to cover. Additional support materials, CEU instructions. So if you're here for continuing education credits, good job. Those are through ABIH, AAA, IFMA, and ASPE that we're approved through. So, or if you just want a general certificate of attendance, we're happy to do that as well. But those instructions will be in the follow-up email, and then also that full Q&A document will be available to you as well. Now, quickly, just a bit about us as a company, and again, why we think we're situated well to present this material to you. And then we'll get into the agenda and the ADA and its origins. But our founder, Luther Haws, gentleman down there on the bottom left, invented the world's first sanitary drinking fountain bubbler head in 1906 amidst the ban the cup movements and formed the Haws Sanitary Drinking Fountain Company in 1909 in Berkeley, California. Luther, he was working as a sanitation inspector for Berkeley when he had the thought to invent a device that would prevent users from spreading germs and disease through public hydration. And that device was the drinking fountain bubbler head. You see, prior to Luther and his invention, it was very commonplace to see public fountains with constant running water, which isn't so uncommon in the rest of the world, even today. You'll still find fountains like that, but you'd stop and drink from a cup that was attached to the fountain via a chain that you filled from the fountain, which was the preferred method pre-1900s, because nobody believed in the silly notion of microscopic germs and viruses that we were sharing via mouths and saliva. So this had obvious public sanitation issues, right? Mouth cup, and from person to person. Some of the common diseases at the time were cholera, typhoid fever, dysentery, all of which potentially fatal at the time, and they spread from mouth to cup to mouth. And lucky for us, Luther put his very inventive mind to the task, and he found a solution that has continued to benefit public health and safety to this day. Fun fact, his first prototype was actually part of his bed. He used the bedpost and used that for his first prototype for the bubbler head. Haws was also responsible for developing the first electric water coolers, back when they were still dropping off your daily ice block to cool the water inside of the units. We also had the first line of standardized accessible drinking fountains and pioneered the bottle filler category back when nobody cared about bottle fillers, and it was an absolute pain to get them onto projects. And now, I mean, that's everybody's go-to. You can't throw a rock without hitting a job with bottle fillers on it. That's everybody's favorite. We've had a long history with hydration and public sanitation that we are very proud of here at Haws. Today, our location is not the one photo there. That would be too small. We currently have a 210,000 square foot advanced manufacturing facility in Sparks, Nevada. If you're unfamiliar with Sparks, Nevada, Reno, Nevada, and if you don't know Reno, then Tahoe. But we're right in that little valley there. Continuously working tirelessly to improve the health and safety of our global community. Now, today, we're covering the overview of the ADA legislation for drinking fountains, common ADA installation issues, because we want you to see what is happening that is funky out there, right? What's going wrong, what not to do. ADA drinking fountain compliance and bottle filler installations, hygienic hydration solutions, and then we'll do that brief Q&A there at the end. So real quick, overview of the ADA legislation, what it is, why it is, etc. So before we get into it, go ahead and soak this in. It's important to remember that this is civil rights legislation. Okay, the ADA legislation was the first major legislation to treat disability rights as a civil rights issue. Prior to this standard, its accessibility was up to the business, and it was very infrequently available. People didn't want to spend the money to update their businesses and thought that your disability was not their problem. And a collective change to infrastructure that we could make and solve for together is something that we ended up putting together. So there were no teeth in any of the former requirements, as there were some before the ADA, to provide access to buildings and grounds for an entire class of people. And without teeth in those standards, they were being very heavily neglected. But thanks to people like Justin Dart, the gentleman there in the sweet hat, tie, and coat, he was one of the biggest advocates. Former head of Dart Industries, a company responsible for such brands as like Duracell, Tupperware, etc. He was quite wealthy and one of the biggest advocates for the movement. Is often referred to as the grandfather of the ADA, as he himself was disabled and had contracted polio when he was a young man. Alongside fellow advocates like George H.W. Bush, who was the sitting president and signed the Americans with Disabilities Act into law on July 26, 1990, The new act granted reasonable accommodations to people with disabilities and prohibited discrimination based on those disabilities. Okay, there were protests and counter protests. They had demonstrations, like the Capitol crawl, which was a huge one, people abandoning wheelchairs and walking devices to crawl up the steps to demand to speak to the Speaker of the House, etc. So very interesting history. And here you have the photo of the ADA being signed and the deal sealed at the White House. Justin Dart there on the right. So with the history lesson out of the way, just a quick little story on how this all began. I always like to start it that way. We're going to get into poll question number 1. Samantha, if you would, please.
All right, our first poll question of today is, what is your role when it comes to drinking fountains / hydration solutions? Please check all that apply, and if no role, please do not answer. Your choices are install / maintain, specify the product, recommend brand / model, purchase / place the order, or sell the product. I'm going to give you guys...
Just in case you're curious why Hayden's voice changed, in the background is Samantha. She's our showrunner. She's making sure everything is going smoothly. She might be in the chat there chatting with you, but she is behind the scenes making sure everything goes well, and she'll be doing our Q&A later for us.
Yes, thank you, Justin. I'm just the voice in the void. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your participation. I see a bunch of you have voted, so I'm going to go ahead and end this first poll.
Which will bring us to the Americans with Disabilities Act 28 CFR Part 36 Title 3 regarding public accommodations in commercial facilities, and its requirements are enforced by none other than our Department of Justice. Title 3 is going to be our entire focus today. The following are the key sections of the standard pertaining to drinking fountains, bottle fillers, and their compliance. Just remember that the standard affects everything from handrails to drinking fountains to baby changing tables and so on. So a lot of what you're going to hear also applies to many other devices, but our focus is, again, drinking fountains, bottle fillers. And quickly, just remember that Title 2, because I always get asked, covers state and local government, and Title 1 has more to do with anti-discrimination of disabled employees. Remember also that this is based on ANSI A117.1, which is also a great source of information on bottle filler compliance beyond what the current ADA standard covers. And then that standard protects persons well beyond those with an inability or with difficulty walking. So the standards as a whole covers sensory impairment, extremes of physical size, reaching or manipulation disabilities, and those are just some of the different disabilities that the legislation helps to protect. And the goal of it all is really universal access and design. So I want to kick this off by talking to section 36.403, which gives us a list of priorities when making alterations to provide accessibility in a facility. And you're going to notice that in the list, drinking fountains take a pretty high priority, even over accessible parking, etc. But we need to focus on the entrance, the route, restrooms, public telephones, fountains, parking, storage, alarms, all high priority items and basic human necessities when navigating the world. All people everywhere need water, right? It's right at the tippy top of the list of things we need to survive, and we need to ensure that it's accessible to everyone as we all navigate our local cities, the globe, etc. We have to have access to publicly accessible drinking water. Now, Chapter 1, Section 102, just lets us know that this document contains both the requirements for adult accessibility and children's accessibility based on their anthropometrics, which is just a fancy word for measurements, capabilities of the human body. Children are defined as age 12 or younger in the ADA. Anything above that is considered an adult and is why you typically find adult height equipment in many facilities. As a matter of fact, when you're in public, the reason you don't run into many children's height equipment is because the expectation is that you are with an adult if you are a child under the age of 12, and they may assist you with getting water from a fountain or otherwise. Now, Chapter 2 explains that where there is one fountain, typically a high side fountain, that there must be 2 fountains. Local building code determines the number of drinking fountains that must be installed based on occupancy, secured areas, and exterior sites. This simply states that there must be a high fountain and a low fountain. What most people don't realize is that the low side fountain is not the only one that's designed for people with disabilities. The high side fountain is also a disabled accessible fountain, and it is designed for those with bending or stooping disabilities that may be using a walker, cane, or crutches, and may not be physically able to utilize the low side fountain. Other than aesthetics, drinking fountains are not designed for able-bodied people. It's reasonable to assume that if you are able-bodied, that you can take a drink from whichever fountain that you choose. So if you are installing a single fountain in your facility or in a park, you must satisfy this requirement and install a second fountain. They don't even need to be next to each other. You can separate them, put them at either end of a hallway or whatever, but they must be both present and accessible. Now, 211.3 is referred to as the 50-50 rule, and this one's easy to remember. And it simply states that half of the units installed have to be high fountains, and the other half have to be low fountains. So for example, if you are installing 6 new fountains into a building, you couldn't do 4 high fountains and 2 low fountains. You must provide 3 high and 3 low. The exception to this rule is where the number of fountains yields a fraction, which is typically instances where you have gone above and beyond what is required for the facility, and you've decided to add an additional fountain or drinking fountains, etc., high or low, it doesn't matter. But you've wanted to add more, and you run into this exception. So if it yields a fraction and it's above and beyond what it was required for the facility, that fountain can be either high or low. It doesn't matter. It's entirely up to you. In Chapter 3, we start getting into dimensional and mechanical elements. You're going to hear me use the term element a few times throughout the presentation. An element is just a universal word for the device that we are granting access to. This can be the drinking fountain, phone, fire extinguisher, baby changing table, etc. Many of the measurements that we're about to cover apply to, again, many types of elements. So this is one of the most important measurements to remember. Very frequently what's being violated in tear out and reinstalls. 305.3 and 305.5 detail clear ground space to accommodate the wheelchair underneath the fountain, allowing an approach that is completely unobstructed to the fountain. You must provide a 30-inch by 48-inch space of clearance underneath the element, which is just a bit larger than your typical adult-sized wheelchair, giving the user clear floor space for the wheelchair and the extra space for their hands to maneuver the wheelchair into and out of that space. I like this example. This, I think, pretty clearly demonstrates the clear ground space in front of the element. In this case, we have a telephone, which is a bit dated, and a fire extinguisher. 305.5 explains the positioning of this clear ground space, allowing for either a forward approach, like you see on the left, or a parallel approach, like you see on the right. And we'll cover both forward and parallel approaches here. So remember that all of these measurements are bare minimum requirements. Okay, you can provide more space, and the more space, the better. When the element is in an alcove, like in the examples here, wheelchair users are going to need additional space to maneuver. and the clear floor space changes based on both the depth of the alcove and the type of approach that you are attempting. So in our first example here, our 30 by 48 inches becomes 36 by 48 inches when the depth of that alcove that you're designing exceeds 24 inches. And in the second example, for a parallel approach, when the depth of the alcove exceeds 15 inches, then our clear floor space must be 30 by 60 inches. More and more states are requiring the use of alcoves, and it just makes sense for those elements to be out of the path of travel. And if we don't have this additional space in these alcoves, it can be very, I don't know how many of you have ever had a stint or utilize a wheelchair currently, but it doesn't take a lot to make a space fairly inaccessible or inaccessible entirely. Okay, so adding the extra space is nice. Otherwise, you get this, this person here on the bottom right, and they're going to have to pull a like Starsky and Hutch, get a running head start and do hit the brakes and turn into it and slide, which ain't happening. So extra space, if you can imagine how that wheelchair would have to move to get into it, then you can imagine how inaccessible and how quickly inaccessible it can get if we don't provide that space. Now, extending up from the clear ground space that we have defined is our toe and knee clearance. So try to think of this clear area as a 3-dimensional space. Our toe clearance is 9 inches from the ground to the bottom of the element, and our knee clearance 27 inches from the ground up to the bottom of the bowl or the leading edge of the element. Obstructions in this yellow highlighted area are another unfortunately common compliance issue. The whole area is a no-no zone. You can't use this space. Okay. We've got some great examples coming up though. We'll show you what we found out in the wild. The space underneath has to be clear. And that includes any space between the victim's knees as well. So like think P-traps, hanging phone books, that's a bit dated too, but those types of devices, anything in that area, unusable completely. And that's because of that maneuverability, right? So we need to be careful how we use that. That brings us to poll question number 2.
All right, number 2 is, which of the following is most important when it comes to your filter of choice? Our options are capacity, PFAS removal, lead removal, or taste/odor removal. Fun stuff. Thank you guys so much for your participation. I see more and more of you submitting your answers, so that's great. This really helps us out on the back end of things. So very much appreciated. We're getting a lot of great answers, and I'll give you guys a few more seconds just to wrap everything up. Alrighty, thank you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and end this poll.
It's like taste, odor, and lead were the winners, and I mean, yeah. Nobody wants to, roll up to a fountain that's got lead and smells a little funky. So make sure you're checking your filter, your fountains, guys. I don't know if you can spot them as well as we can here at Haws. I travel a lot, and I can spot a drinking fountain that has a filter and doesn't have a filter from like a mile away. And I'm always carrying my bottle with me. Filter all the way. You never know what you're getting out of those. So filtration. All right. This brings us to protruding objects, section 307. And it is primarily in place to protect another type of protected class that we haven't really touched on yet. And that class is the visually impaired. Elements may only protrude into a walkway so much and must be located at certain heights, whether they're in the alcove or not. It doesn't matter. This is to prevent anyone with a complete or partial loss of sight from running into those elements, colliding with them, and causing issues. Objects with their leading edge or the lowest point on the very front of the element, above 27 inches, may only protrude a maximum of 4 inches into the path of travel. But so long as that leading edge of that element is at or under 27 inches, this makes them detectable by detection cane, which you see here in the photo, according to the DOJ. Now, this is one of my favorite examples here. And in this example, we have our visually impaired amigo here navigating a hallway. On the bottom right, we see an object very similar in some ways to a drinking fountain, and so long as its leading edge is at or below the 27-inch line, it can be detected using a detection cane, and early enough to be avoided and help prevent potential injury. Okay. Now this fountain and any element, so long as it's meeting the 27-inch requirement, can protrude any amount into this space. Okay. The same rule applies for elements at or above 80 inches from the floor. This is considered headroom clearance, and like the previous example, can extend any amount into the space, which is a bummer for those who are taller than 80 inches. I guess you detect those with your forehead. On the left, although that would be pretty odd for a facility. Now we have an object sitting at above 27 inches and below 80 inches on the left there, smack dab in the middle, and therefore may only protrude into that space by 4 inches, unless it's a handrail. Handrails have special rules and are allowed to protrude only slightly more, 4.5 inches, as an included exception to these measurements. Okay. So be cautious of those. Make sure that we're, and really this that former photo, the reason why alcoves are so popular now is because we can completely remove them from the walkways, and we don't have to run into types of issues that we would otherwise. Now, I'm going to use our 1011 here, HPS and SK3 cane skirt, as well as the SK6 and our 1212 SF unit for these examples. Okay. Now, both of these units are high-low, right? You have a bottle filler on one, no bottle filler on the other. And the cane skirt is on both of these is what we want to discuss. So there's a cane skirt on the left option and a cane curb on the right option. Okay, both of which make the high side fountain discoverable. Okay, detection cane curbs and skirts are unfortunately not used to a high degree, and they really should be. If you do not have an alcove or some or wing walls or something protecting the unit from collision from passerbys and making it detectable, then the cane skirt or curb is the way to go. These allow the high side drinking fountain and its leading lower edge to be brought down to a detectable 27-inch height. The same thing goes for the curb. Now the cane curb extends out to that leading edge and is detectable at the ground, arguably making it detectable much earlier than you would with a cane skirt, as the bottom of the cane detection will hit the curb and allow you to detect it and its presence much earlier. Now, the left side could be high, the right side could be high. It could go either way in public spaces, but it is important either way to make sure that the high side is also detectable and the leading edge is discoverable via cane. People utilizing them, detection canes, are typically utilizing a shoreline or following the outermost edge of a space, which makes these incredibly useful. As they follow that path, they're going to discover the curb or the skirt as they navigate the room. Now, Section 308 brings us to reach range requirements. Another important consideration when considering something like a bottle filler installed on these units, or when things like baby changing stations are put in place. The slide is pretty straightforward. If your reach is unobstructed, like in the photo on the left, you have a 48-inch high, 15-inch minimum reach range. Any buttons, handles, sensors, etc. have to be located within this range. But as soon as we introduce an obstruction, our reach ranges are diminished, right? When an object shorter than 20 inches is in place, we keep our 48-inch high reach range, but our lower reach range disappears since we now have the fountain or a similar element in place. When reaching over an object that is 20 to 25 inches, our high reach range is shortened to only 44 inches, which makes sense. Generally speaking, drinking fountains are shorter than 20 inches. So the middle example will be what our reach ranges are going to be for that type of equipment, usually. Remember, we want to make things as easy as possible and not create a challenge for the user. And with the drinking fountains, that middle example is almost universal. Now, the DOG advisory defines reach ranges for children based on age. Remember, children are defined as ages 12 and under in the ADA. These are all ranges that apply to both forward and parallel approach to an element. Starting on the left, you have ages 3 and 4, high 36, low 20, ages 5 to 8, high 40, low 18, and ages 9 to 12, high 44, low 16. You can see as they age up, they grow, they get bigger, their arm length and reach range gets bigger, so they can reach higher and lower on these reach ranges if you're considering their reach from a device like a wheelchair. So keep these in mind for the reach ranges for any children accessible elements. Now in Chapter 6, we get into the specifics regarding plumbing elements and their measurements. First off, 602.2 covers clear floor space and the necessity to have that clear floor space centered on the unit, not on the alcove, okay? Not on the space, on the device, on the element. So this is for a forward approach, as a parallel approach needs to be set up differently. Obviously, our toe and knee clearance must also still be available. There is an exception included here for parallel approaches to children's units that allows for a parallel approach so long as the bubbler or spout is at a certain height and depth. Okay, knee and toe clearance begins to diminish pretty quickly as we lower fountains for children's use. So the use of a parallel approach is an important option to have, especially considering children's use wheelchairs can vary wildly in size and can even be adult size wheelchairs. Custom size wheelchairs can be expensive, especially if the family doesn't have access to good programs. And they can be pretty quickly outgrown. So a parallel approach can help to solve a lot of these issues. Now, here's a really good illustration on the floor space, just to show you how it is supposed to be positioned. And as far as the fountain goes, since the clear floor space is intended for the wheelchair user, it's centered on the left low side fountain. And since there's no floor space defined in black and white for the high side, the floor space can spill over under the high side fountain as much as is needed. It's also usually assumed that only one person is going to use this device as a whole at a time. If it is stacked, usually the standing person is not going to intrude unless they are also using a device, which would be quite the uncommon occurrance, right? You have a walker and a wheelchair side by side trying to use the fountains at the same time. Not to say it couldn't happen, but it would be create a pretty tight space to use the devices at the same time. But it's usually assumed only one person is going to be approaching the fountains at a time. But that clear floor space centered on the low side fountain, that's the priority. Now here you can see a total width of 48 inches in the alcove wall to wall. It isn't deeper than 24 inches, so we don't need to expand on our 30-inch floor space. You will notice that it shows a separate measurement for California. California has gone above and beyond the standard requirements and mandated an additional 2 inches of floor space, bumping up the width of the floor space to 32 inches. So long as the state requirements go above and beyond the federal standards, they can supersede them. Centering the fountain is not mandatory. By the way, I do want to point that on this slide, but it does make the installation more aesthetically pleasing. So if the alcove was deeper than 24 inches, remember that we would need a total of 36 inches of ground clearance to allow for more maneuverability on a forward or parallel approach. For California, we have our 32 inches and 30 inches elsewhere centered on the low side fountain here. Center line to center line, these fountains are separated by 16 inches, which means we need an additional 16 inches of space on either side of the fountains from the center line to meet our total 32-inch minimum for California. Okay, and a slightly smaller space in most other states, giving 15 inches of clearance on either side. But this is how it's set up. And Hayden will cover it later, but there is a generally agreed upon clear floor space for the high side fountain, but I'll let him explain that to you. But it's not in black and white. It's just a generally agreed upon number based on common devices. That'll bring us to poll question number 3, and where my amigo is going to take over. So I'm going to turn control over.
Thank you, amigo. We are halfway through our poll questions for today, and your third question for today is, which of the following features most encourage you to change or update your spec or model choice? Your choices are aesthetics, auto purge / filtration features, sustainability / energy savings, ease of installation, or meets and exceeds current competitive specifications. Seen a lot of great answers come in. Thank you guys again. Like I said, we're halfway through, so we're doing good. I'll go ahead and end the poll right now. Thank you guys.
All right. Turning it over to Hayden.
All right. So here we have an excerpt from the California Building Code, which made it mandatory to locate all drinking fountains in an alcove or with wing walls. So the reason they did this was to make sure that these elements are not protruding into any pedestrian walkways, and they required that these alcoves must be 32 inches wide by 18 inches deep at a minimum. On top of that, a few other states have adopted this as well. It's not just California. It includes Texas, Georgia, and Connecticut as well, and some local codes. And anywhere that these drinking fountains or bottle fillers cannot be installed in an alcove in these required locations, they must put in place wing walls to act as an alcove. Those wing walls are going to be shorter railings or pony walls that have to stick out at least as far as the leading edge of the drinking fountain and to within 6 inches of the floor vertically. So now we're going to take a little break from the legislation, and we are going to look at a little bit more of my learning style, which is looking at pictures of what not to do and then comparing them to pictures of how to install these properly. So we'll start off with the installation issues. And with that, let's hop into our first one that actually has 2 issues in this one example. So here we have 2 high-low drinking fountains, one with the bottle filler installed in an alcove. Now, both of our problems are going to come from that unit on the left-hand side. So the first one that you'll probably notice is our low side drinking fountain. We need 30 inches of clear floor space centered under that for wheelchair accessibility. And in this example, we do not have that. We are just too close to that wall, and we need to swap the height of these 2 fountains in order to make sure that we can get the room that we need. The second issue that we run into is having the bottle filler above a high side drinking fountain. I'll talk about that legislation later, but what you really need to know is it's above our maximum high reach range. So anywhere on that bottle filler that needs to be accessible has to be less than that 48 inches of maximum high side reach range. In this example, it's far too high, so we need to move that bottle filler to one of our low side drinking fountains as well. That same problem comes into play in this example. That bottle filler touchless sensor in the middle of that unit is above the 48 inches. In order to make this compliant, they would need to tear out this bottle filler, install it somewhere else as a standalone, which it's actually designed to be, or they could install a bottle filler that's going to sit lower to that low side wheelchair accessible drinking fountain and within our reach ranges. And then here we have two examples where they got it half right. They knew the ADA requirement was to put it above a low-side drinking fountain. However, they again installed a bottle filler that's meant to be a standalone above a drinking fountain, and it was well above that high side reach range. And these are costly fixes to make. You're just tearing out that bottle filler to install it somewhere else, on top of getting a fine from the ADA or the DOJ on behalf of the ADA. And you could install a low side bottle filler again, just a unit that's going to sit closer to that drinking fountain. When we are installing children height drinking fountains alongside adult height drinking fountains, this tends to be the design we want to go with. It's aesthetically pleasing, it's a cascading design. However, in this example, they installed our drinking fountains a little out of order. They took our high side drinking fountain and our wheelchair accessible drinking fountain that share that back panel, and they installed it with the low side being at a children's height. The problem with that is, since these units are sharing a back panel, they're too close together to have wheelchair accessibility clear floor space to that unit that's in the middle there. In order to fix this, we would need to take that high-low unit that's meant for adult heights, move it up and to the right, and install it at those proper heights for wheelchair accessibility and standing or stooping disabilities accessibility. Then we would take our standalone drinking fountain, move it all the way to the left, and drop it down to a children's height, but far enough away to where it's not going to be cutting into the clear floor space that we need for the wheelchair unit. And then here we have an outdoor example. So outdoor drinking fountains, it is a very common style to have that forward approach that we need, but to have it coming from two different angles. So for the high side drinking fountain, we have it going towards the push button, towards the wall. And for our wheelchair accessible drinking fountain, it's actually going alongside the wall. And in this example, this unit was installed just a few inches too close to the wall, and they had to tear this out, install it just a little bit further away, but they could have made this compliant and saved a good chunk of money just by knowing that requirement up front and providing that 30 inches of clear floor space width that was needed from the wall. So now let's look at some similar examples, but talk about how to install these correctly. And a lot of these slides that I'm about to show you actually show the proper measurements. So they're going to be a great reference for you to go back and use on future projects going forward. So before we dive into it, let's go back and revisit the child requirements or child height requirements for drinking fountains and bottle fillers. So for the spout of the drinking fountain for children's height, it needs to be at 30 inches or less from the finished floor, and it can't be any more than 3.5 inches deep from the front of the bowl. That way kids aren't going to have to bend too far over this unit. Now the ADA also tells us that since we're dropping this unit down so far and it's cutting into the toe and knee clearance, that we can have a parallel approach to child height drinking fountains, unlike the adult height drinking fountains. But many states and local codes nowadays too do not allow for parallel approach. So even though the ADA may say that for child height drinking fountains, if you're planning on using that, I would check your local codes first. It's really based off of just your local codes when it comes to that. We can't just give you a blanket statement. So with that in mind, let's go back and look at that cascading design where we have the 3 different fountain heights, one being at child height and then the other 2 at our adult height requirements. And we're going to be using the Haws wide enamel cast iron drinking fountains because these are still used in a lot of schools. The reason for that is if they're in direct sunlight, they're not absorbing as much heat, so it's not going to burn kids when they put their hands on it, which they tend to do more often than adults. Children tend to go belly up to the drinking fountain and rest on it a little bit more. And on top of that, it just shows fluids to where schools know if they need to clean these more often or if something gets on it that needs to be cleaned right away. So if we want to do that cascading design, the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that our drinking fountains are at the proper heights. So we're going to install our adult height drinking fountains with the wheelchair accessible fountain right at 27 inches to the lower leading edge. That's going to get everything in line for that unit. Then we're going to take our child height drinking fountain and make sure that we're installing it at 30 inches or less from the floor to that spout where the water is actually coming out of. Now we want to make sure that there is 22 inches from the center of that child height drinking fountain to the center of the wheelchair accessible drinking fountain. That 22 inches is important because it gives us 15 inches from the center of our wheelchair fountain to the leading edge of the children's height drinking fountain, therefore giving us that 30 inches of clear floor space that we need under that unit. You'll notice in this picture that our clear floor space goes under the high side drinking fountain. That is perfectly okay. As long as it's above 27 inches for the knee clearance, our clear floor space can go under that. It's only that 30 inches of width up to 27 inches off the ground. For outdoor units, we're going to use a common style to that one that I showed you earlier where that forward approach is coming from different angles. And we're going to use the Haws 3150. It's a concrete outdoor drinking fountain. It has an adjustable arm that can be at a wheelchair accessible height, or you can drop it down to a children's height as well if you want. And for these examples, we're going to be using it at a wheelchair accessible height. And the first thing that we want to do, if we're installing this near a wall or a fence, we want to make sure we have our clear floor space. We need that 48 inches of length, and we need 15 inches from the center of the drinking fountain bowl to the wall or fence to make sure that we have 30 inches of clear floor space width. As you can tell, a big pain point is that clear floor space. It's something that we often run into that makes these units non-compliant with the ADA standards. So we really want to emphasize how important it is to keep that in mind anytime you're installing these, to have that 30 by 48 inches. And then you also see our first example of clear floor space for a high side drinking fountain as well. That is 30 by 30 inches. That is the generally agreed upon amount of sufficient space that needs to be provided to these units so that somebody with standing or stooping disabilities can easily access it. They are often going to have a walker or maybe crutches or even a cane with them, and we need to make sure that we are providing them the space that they need while using that equipment. For outdoor drinking fountains, you're also required to put down a hard scope pad around these units to make sure that those devices like wheelchairs or walkers can be used to actually access the equipment. If it's loose dirt or grass, it would be too difficult for them. So we want to make sure that we're providing that. And for this type of unit and the dimensions in this, that hard scope pad would need to be 69 by 52 inches in order to enclose all of that clear floor space. For wing walls, if you're removing this from the path of travel a little bit, you got to make sure those wing walls are sticking out at least as far as the leading edge of the drinking fountain like you see here. And they have to be wide enough that they're not cutting into that clear floor space. So great image to use if you're working on any wing walls in an outdoor setting, if you're planning on using them. I know I've come into this type of use time to time. It's not too popular, but just keep this in mind in case it ever comes up. And here's a quick lineup to show off some of the Haws outdoor drinking fountains, the different ways and styles that we meet ADA accessibility and fit your needs as well. We have a full lineup of these. One of our more popular ones is the 3600 series, that unit on the far right. Those you can mix and match the bottle filler and the drinking fountain. You can add dog bowls to them, pretty much whatever you need, even if it's special colors. We have it all in the outdoor lineup. And back to the fun stuff. Our last piece of legislation for the day before we finish up with a few more examples, and then Justin will show you a few products before we get into our Q&A as well. But the 2010 ADA standards actually come from the ANSI standards. And in 2017, ANSI posted a revision. It was the A117.1-2017. And a part of that update was the inclusion or the addition of bottle filling stations to to the Section 602 heading of drinking fountains. And the key word there is addition. Bottle fillers cannot replace a required drinking fountain. I know that this is a question that we've already gotten several times on the back end of this webinar as I've been going through and answering some of your questions. So just know that bottle fillers cannot replace a required drinking fountain. You still have to have your minimum number of low and high side ADA drinking fountains. You can just add bottle fillers as an extra. Now, if you have extra drinking fountains, you can get rid of those drinking fountains and replace them with a bottle filler, but you still have to have that minimum number that you're required to meet. Bottle fillers also have their own set of ADA standards. So depending on if you're installing this as a standalone or above a drinking fountain, it changes a little bit. If you're installing a bottle filler above a drinking fountain, it must be installed above the low side wheelchair accessible drinking fountain. Once you do that, you can then add one to the high side drinking fountain, but we can never have a bottle filler on the high side standing or stooping disabilities fountain and not on the wheelchair fountain. And we need to make sure it's within our reach range as well, and that it has the clear floor space at 30 by 48 inches centered for a forward approach on it too. If you have a standalone bottle filler, things change a little bit. You can have a parallel approach or a forward approach for clear floor space to a standalone bottle filler that is not above a drinking fountain. And then the last piece of legislation on these is that they must be controlled to either be hand operated or automatic. So for Haws, we offer a push button for the controlled side of things or the hand operated side of things, and we offer a touchless sensor for that automatic control. So some examples of bottle fillers. Here we are using the Haws Revive series. This is our architecturally designed recessed bottle filler, and it always comes on our low side drinking fountain like the ADA requires. We are not one of the manufacturers that provides a standard unit with the bottle filler on a high side, since that is not compliant. And everything in this image is set up properly and fully ADA compliant. If you installed that low side drinking fountain at the proper height with the lower leading edge at 27 inches, our bottle filler is well within that maximum high reach range of 48 inches. We're only at 41 and an 1/8 inch, and everything is centered, so you're gonna have the forward approach for clear floor space centered on both of those units like we need. If you're using a different type of bottle filler, say our 1920 series that can be stainless steel or white enamel like you see here, again, you're going to want to position it above the low side drinking fountain, or you can even install it above a single drinking fountain. This can be your wheelchair accessible drinking fountain. If you already have a bottle filler and drinking fountain for wheelchair accessibility, you could also install this as your high side, or more commonly for single units like this, we tend to see it at a children's height. And if you're installing at a children's height, you got to keep in mind your reach range and the bubbler height. So if we install this all the way at the top of that maximum bubbler height for children's height, it would be at 30 inches to the spout. And our reach range is still beneath that maximum high for the 9 to 12-year-old age range, which is 44 inches. We're only at 42 and 5/8 on that type of example. Oh, one slide too far. Sorry, everybody. So whether it is in a public building, a airport, if it's in a college or a hospital, providing for easy access to all facilities by all people is the primary goal of the ADA standards for accessible design. And hopefully our quick guide so far today has been able to demonstrate those key standards and also just to help you avoid getting them wrong. So we're going to wrap up this portion of the webinar before I hand things back over to Justin with just a quick example of a high-low drinking fountain with a bottle filler. This is in the Reno Tahoe International Airport, just down the street from the Haws headquarters. And it shows proper ADA compliance for clear floor space, our reach ranges. It's all aesthetically pleasing. We really want to make sure that we're educating properly all throughout the U.S. but we make sure that we're doing that more than ever in our own backyard. So a highly trafficked area like airport just down the street from Haws, we want to make sure that everything is fully compliant. This is just a great example of that. And then with that, we will go on to our fourth poll question.
Thank you, Hayden. Poll question number 4 is, when was the last time you updated your spec? Your choices are within 3 months, within 6 months, within 12 months, longer than 12 months, or not applicable. Thank you, everyone. You guys are continuing to impress me with how many of you are answering our poll questions. Very much appreciated. I'll give you guys about 4 more seconds and then I'll go ahead and end the poll.
Nice. I think that was like 70% of attendees that were participating. Thank you, everybody. It's greatly appreciated. We got to keep the finger on the pulse. You know what I mean? Now, really quickly, I'm just going to cover one of the newer products from you with you and give you some insight into aesthetics, ADA compliance, bottle fillers, fountains, what direction we're going with as a company, as an industry, and look at one of the new products that is currently introduced to the market and what that type of product looks like and what the more common features are, and if you were updating your specs, the type of products that are available now. This is the hydration station. This is the Haws Revive. You want touchless, programmable, LED electronic bottle filler displays, best-in-class sensor. Everybody here, I mean, if you're dealing with bottle fillers, fountains, specs, if you're dealing with hand towel dispensers, toilets, etc., sensors are a weak point. It sucks. But it doesn't matter if it's schools or a public place, convention center, whatever. Sensors are a place or a particular product of or point of weakness in products. This thing is crazy. We put a sensor in here. The original video the engineering team sent me showed them going like full Norman Bates on the sensor, but you can scratch, stab, goop up, whatever. It's not a light type of sensor. It's a time to destination sensor, so it sends out a little pulse and detects you in front of the unit, and it includes that in this particular unit and going forward on all of our products. This is type of sensor is top notch. It also has 24-hour purge to prevent Legionella, which should be a standardized product on this type of equipment in every industry. I mean, if you have schools that are sitting that don't have anybody checking or utilizing the water fountains and bottle fillers all summer, if you're in a hospital where bacteria and et cetera is a high level of concern, you definitely want something that is regularly purging the water lines inside of the unit. Legionella is very serious, and you do not want to have to deal with that type of concern in your facilities or with somebody's health. All right, so auto purge is a must-have function. This is also smart field configurable, right? Which is exclusive to Haws. We can either throw in a filter or we can throw in a strainer. It's entirely up to the customer. You order one single model, and they get to choose for themselves whether it's one or the other. They can decide down the line, I want this to be filtered, and it's not some complicated process of retrofit or tearing the unit out and putting in a new one. You just simply put in the new filter. It's so cool. 16 gauge stainless steel, of course, because we want a much higher level of vandal resistance for these things. It goes for the hardware as well. Drinking fountains classically, wherever they're installed, they have to be highly vandal resistant. People have a itch when they see these things and nobody's around. They just want to mess with them. They want to jump on them. They want to get in there and mess around. If it's an outdoor drinking fountain, they just want to shove a bunch of rocks and sand and gummy bears down the drains. Luckily, we have a high focus on that vandal resistance and preventing such things in our equipment, so this thing is quite Durable, you'd have to wake up very early with a very serious grudge against a Haws drinking fountain to get anything done. This is the new lineup of products for the Revive Hydration Station series. Wall-mounted, of course, with chilling, without chilling, single fountains, and high-low fountains. All options are available, and they look incredible. We're very proud of the aesthetics of the bottle filler in particular are very clean, very sleek, and very hard to tamper with. Speaking of that field configurable filter, if I have any nerds in here, I know I'm a huge one. I'm a huge Back to the Future fan and many other movies. But our project name for this was DeLorean. We were inspired by those gull wing doors on the old DeLorean. And you can see here on the right, the filter swings out, which gives us a tiny, tiny, within standard studs in the wall configuration and installation that allows that filter to swing out rather than having to make a huge space installed for access to that filter. It simply swivels out and we can swap it out, which is very cool. Now, if you are interested in that product, definitely go to the Hawsco website or you might have your chance right here to have a team member review or update your specifications. That would be Hayden, and Hayden's cool. We like Hayden. Hayden's very helpful and very thorough, and he'd be happy to get in there and help you with anything that you would like him to help with as far as your specs go.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. I'll give you guys a few more seconds to vote. Last time we did get 68% of you that sent in answers, so I'm going for 70. I'll give you guys a few more seconds to answer. Thank you guys so much. All right, everybody, I'll go ahead and end the poll.
Awesome. Now, some of you submitted questions, and I want to go through those. Sam is going to answer those questions. So we're going to hang on. We're at the end of the hour, so we understand if you have to bounce, but we're going to dive into these questions and answer. I have a page of them that I put together in the background. And Samantha is going to go and ask these of Hayden and myself, and we're going to dig into them. Now, some of you asked some weird questions, okay? I don't know how to help you with your day trading. I don't know how to fix your toaster. But I do know a lot about the ADA, and so does Hayden, and we can help you with those. So here are some of the ones that were answered, or asked, I should say.
Question number 1, why do we need a low and a high to meet ADA?
I'll go ahead and take this one. The ADA, they require the 2 drinking fountain heights because the low side drinking fountain is going to be for our wheelchair accessibility, and the high side drinking fountain is for the standing persons with disabilities, bending or stooping accessibility. So although although a lot of people often have a misconception that the high side drinking fountain is for able-bodied people, they're actually both designed for different types of disabilities, and we expect that an able-bodied person is going to be able to use either of the 2 drinking fountain heights.
Perfect. Thank you, Hayden. Question number 2, is it possible / code compliant to only have bottle fillers if paper cups are supplied adjacent to the filler?
My turn. I will. So you're right there at the kind of the question, right? And almost the answer is why isn't it, right? If I have paper cups there, the answer is it has to be more universal than that, and drinking fountains are universally accessible, right? I don't need a cup, I don't need a special device, and I don't have to crane my neck or do a handstand to take a drink out of a bottle filler. Drinking fountains are universally accessible, and the low and the high side versions are intended to make it that case, and there's no exception for those. Drinking fountains will be required on every project well into the future. Bottle fillers are simply a supplemental accessory. And it works that way because, again, not all of us have the ability to carry one or have a bottle or a paper cup or et cetera and so on with us. And the drinking fountain makes it easy for everybody universally to get a drink. So not compliant to just have the bottle fillers. Got to have the drinking fountains.
Question number 3, does the minimum clearance approach have to be centered on the drinking fountain or can it be off-center? If it can be off-center, what is the overlap that is acceptable?
The minimum fair floor space approach has to be centered on the drinking fountain, and same goes for bottle fillers. It can never be off-centered. We have to have that 30 by 48 inches of forward approach centered on the unit itself. So even if you have a high and a low, for example, you're not centering it in between the two units. You're always centering that forward approach clear floor space on the wheelchair accessible unit.
Our 4th question for today is, architects tend to favor an alcove for drinking fountains. How does this translate with the ADA regulations?
I'll do that. So they do, and it directly translates as a win. It's the preference everywhere, honestly, and will continue to be. The days of an era of having those elements directly protrude into the walkways is long gone. That might fit for some states still and their requirements, but eventually alcoves will, I believe, be the universal answer to this, and removing these larger elements specifically out of the walkways. It makes for a much cleaner looking project, cleaner design, and much more aesthetically pleasing building or facility. So, and not to mention, it really gives the user who would be utilizing a wheelchair or maybe other walking device that can be quite large from themselves protruding quite a way into the walkway if it's directly mounted on the wall. This allows for that unit to be alcoved. I have a more private space to utilize the fountain, the bottle filler, and access this device without myself too protruding back into this walkway or space. And it's just much more universal. It's much more useful. It looks better, and it fits. The use of alcoves fits directly with the goal of the ADA, which is universal accessibility.
Perfect. Our last and final question is, where is the bottle filler reach range measured to, considering the bottle can be held lower than the filler outlet? Or is it measured to the button control, or both? How about if it is auto dispensing optical controlled?
Yeah, so for all elements, the maximum and minimum reach ranges are going to be measured to whatever the highest or lowest part of the element that needs to be accessible is. So for bottle fillers, for example, this would typically be the activation button or the touchless sensor for the high side reach range. That tends to be the highest part of the unit that we need to access. However, if that activator says beneath the bottle filler stand, for example, then the bottle filler stand would need to be within our reach ranges still, because that would be the highest part that we need to access.
Thank you, Hayden. So for now, with the amount of time we spent, we're gonna pause it. So if you've submitted other questions, etc., and you definitely have, we're gonna compile those. Hayden and I are gonna dive into them and get those fully answered onto a spreadsheet, and then we'll kick those out to you in the follow-up material. So thank you very much for that. That email will be sent out soon. I would say look probably more within 24 hours, but it'll also include the on-demand recording, the presentation slides, additional support materials, CEU instructions, very important. That is in the email, and then you can reach out to us, and we'll make sure to get you all set and with those the CEU credits, Q&A, and then we also have some information on Revive follow-up for you guys. Also, contact our customer service if you need anything at all. They're absolutely incredible. That's their phone number, toll-free number, and email there. Our Haws technical support is available at the 800 number there, and I would highly advise saving their email. If you have questions about our product that are highly detailed, or you want support on existing products, etc., or you're curious about a project, they can get you to the right person and ensure that we're getting your questions answered, not your answers questioned. Tech support at hawsco.com, very useful email to have. And then hawsco.com, we are so proud of our website, its capabilities, and how useful it is to architects, engineers, contractors, etc., anybody that is utilizing our equipment, and either pre or post installation. Hawsco.com has all of the answers. If you're interested in continued CEU credits and other options or ways to get those, I have an ANSI Z358.1 webinar coming up in October that you should most definitely attend, and you can find information on that on Hawsco.com. And then utilize our live chat feature on Hawsco.com if you have any other questions and you'd rather avoid calling us directly. It's very useful. With that, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you attending the webinar today. Follow up with us if you need anything at all, and we'll be in touch. Please continue, go forward, and be champions for compliance, and let us know how we can be partners with you. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.